Good morning, Aristo.
Good afternoon, Ron. Or is it morning?
Okay,
Boy, this sends me through a
so we're
loop.
going to just let you take off. You can start if you want with scapegoating, or you can start anywhere you'd like, but people already know who you are. We've already done the first video, so people will recognize both of us. and so I'm just going to let you talk right now, and we'll see how the conversation flows.
Very good. I listened to your video today. I saw it, and you talked about scapegoating and manifesting desires, all of this related to the emotional low or trough. And I just want to emphasize that. And before we got on now, we had a little bit of a discussion about how people relate to your videos. That you notice that some people, when you're in an emotional high, they like your videos more. And that's natural. I mean, you mentioned this yourself as well about the uplifting videos. You like to see uplifting videos, you like to hear uplifting messages, and the channelers and all of that, and people like the same as you. And I agree. I don't like people, videos, and I'll listen to Alex Jones, for example, but I'm very, very careful in what I take in because of a lot of people who are on the show or called, we're all gonna die, we're all gonna this, we're all gonna that, where the framework of doom is taken seriously beyond the necessity of actually really revealing that something needs to be done. It's almost like if you have an illness, somebody always being over your head telling you, oh, you're gonna get, if you don't take your medicine, you're gonna die, you're gonna do, it's like enough already, all right. But at the same time, there's also the issue that none of us likes to feel uncomfortable, and we like to get our daily dose of upliftment. Upliftment is good when it's inspiring, but if it becomes a dependency, then we can shift into vampiric mode. And it's not like, oh, those people are vampires and psychopaths and we're better or whatever. Anybody can turn into a kind of vampiric person. Anybody can become dependent. Anybody can be hateful. There, by the grace of God, go I. And I believe that this is an important understanding relating to the issue of scapegoating. Because at the same time, you tend to not value other people when you become thick-skinned in terms of evaluating yourself. Either numb to how you feel and how things are, or prone to guilt, prone to blame, even blaming the word judgment. You notice the loops of manipulation that we go through in our discussions on the Facebook page and with other people that, oh, you're judging me. Well, you're saying that you're judging me as a judgment. Yeah, but your judgment of my judgment is still a judgment. And it goes round and round in the sense of, basically what is the person trying to say? In the last video that we made, I mentioned when somebody talks to you, get into the body sense and really feel what they're saying beyond what they're saying in their words. It's the advice people give men, Sometimes men get this advice. When you listen to a woman, it's not just what she says in terms of the words she's telling you, but it's how she feels. Maybe there's a different message underlying it. And this applies, I believe, to all of us. So as we get in, we can take out the context of, let's forget about the word judgment. It's very human and natural to evaluate. My whole premise here is to be so forgiving that we don't need to be forgiven, in the sense that it's not even an issue. There by the grace of God go I. It's something that I don't say that in my head all the time, but I feel the essence of it, and I look around and I say, if I was in that person's shoes, I'd probably be acting much the same way. And I can't put them in my shoes, but there has to be a link, there has to be a connection. And sometimes we can actually use that uplifting vibration to establish a connection. When I'm feeling high and I get into the low of another person, I can sense their hunger and say, yes, keep making me feel high. And it's almost like vampiric. It's, I don't care, I'm going to feed off of it. It's like, no, we're having a circulation here, so I'm going to feel what you're feeling because it's also part of me. You're going to feel what I'm feeling, but I'm going, I'm going to call the shots, as it were, because I'm from a position of choosing to come to you. So,
I have a question for you.
yeah.
You know, as you're talking and I'm listening to you, you're sounding like me because I tend to put myself often, not always, but often in the other person's shoes, and that's a quality of a 9 in the Enneagram. Have you ever had done the Enneagram? And
Yeah, I haven't had somebody else do it. I've explored it myself, and I think I pretty much fit the bill of a 9 as well.
yeah, I just, as you were talking, I was getting that impression. Because Steve asked me after our last video, what number do I think you are? And I said, well, I haven't really thought about it, Steve. Steve is my Enneagram teacher. And he's the one that has shot some of the videos in my house. If you remember back a couple of times that we did videos in my home on a Wednesday night for 1 hour.
Yeah, I remember.
And so he can talk with somebody for a little while, and he can usually peg what number they are after a relatively short conversation because he's worked with it so many times. But I was picking up that you were not. And
I always put myself in other people's shoes because that's the way I understand. It feels natural to me, you know. And for a while, I've been turbulent about it because there's all kinds of, you know, judgments about, you know, why are you doing this? Are you trying to have everybody like you all the time? And when you go through an esoteric path, it's a lot easier, more facilitated when you basically go straight in a certain direction, you know, along your own path, so to speak. Do what you do, and don't deal with the noise. I deal with the noise, you know. I broaden the bandwidth, so to speak, and I want to take in as much as possible because I feel there's more. I feel more alive that way, and so engaging with other people, you know, quietly, not so much in a kind of, you know, I'm feeling what you're doing now and all of this, but basically, even people I don't know, even people around me, the atmosphere, basically, inhaling the atmosphere. I feel that when I do reach the spiritual high, I'm not so much lifting up, but I'm actually bringing it down. It's almost an indication that maybe nines are people who are very focused on the heaven and earth dynamic, bringing heaven to earth, because they want to have as many grounding points as possible, as many patterns of resonating as possible. It's almost like mechanically, if you have a base, and the broader the base is, the more stable the pillar that rests on it. If it's just a little point, it'll fall.
well, I never think, oh, I wonder if I'm behaving like a 9. I just do what I do, and you know, and I think whenever I've tried to be something other than just being, be something that has a definition, I usually get stuck in that. And I remember one time I stood up to deliver a message in a church, and I was actually trying to deliver a message that was from a preacher that lived in the 19th century, Charles Finney, and and I was trying to deliver his talk, and I was stumbling all over myself for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then I apologized, and I said, well, I'm just going to talk from my heart. As soon as I let go of trying to deliver something that was somebody else's words and just went into my own heart, everything flowed nicely thereafter. But it was really bumbling for a few minutes.
The mind is not equipped to those things. I mean, all of this talk we have about ego, for example, and people place all these burdens on their mind, trying to figure out with the mind everything, trying to analyze, trying to evaluate, generalizing, specifying, and then they go, when they're not satisfied, when the mind doesn't put out what they want, when it resorts to conditioning to save itself, to save energy, they slam the ego, which is basically the mind, the identity label of the mind itself, the individual mind. And it's like, obviously, man, you're treating your ego mind like a slave, and you know, or it's treating itself like a slave, but basically the totality of our being still hasn't come into completion. So even saying, well, you're doing this or you're doing that, that's another mental construct. It doesn't matter. When we feel with our heart, however, we're not dependent on these identity frames, you know, and we can be grounded, and we can be present, and we can include everything, and it's not threatening. And then we can face the emotional lows by doing that and see that, okay, this is sluggish now. let's circulate, let's make love to it. It's not just, let's love it from here to there, but let's move into the life force. And that's what the emotional lows teach me at least.
Have you watched any of the Collective Imagination, or now the One People's, or used to be Freedom Reigns broadcast? Have you listened to any of those?
I listened to some of the first ones, as this thing was getting started with Heather's talk and Santos Bonacci on them and stuff like that, but I usually don't tune
Well,
in.
like last night's call, I missed a good part of it because I had a telephone call that took up a good piece of the beginning. But in any case, the energy that I'm noticing there is an energy that I think is pretty much catching on around the world, and that is people are aware that we're starting to do things in a new way. I can feel people really entering the new paradigm of wholeness, of unity, consciousness, and it's I sense it as a really good thing and a good sign. Although today I was talking about the scapegoating, and I mean I get people. Just a couple of days ago I got an email from somebody saying that what do you think of the Muslims? They're causing an awful lot of problems in the world. How are we going to handle this Muslim problem? And I said, there is no Muslim problem. The problem is that there's certain people that have a vested interest in creating disharmony, and they continue to do that, and they continue to attempt to polarize people on anything that they can polarize us about. And right now, Islam is in the Western world anyway, Islam is painted as the problem, and everything is scapegoated onto the Islamic people.
Interestingly enough, that's the con job of the other people we're scapegoating.
Right. And I got that in meditation this morning. Like, I started out with the religious thing, and I thought, but then aren't you scapegoating the bankers? Aren't you scapegoating the elite?
Well,
And
I wrote something, definitely. But I wrote something on your fan page. I hope people go and see it if I don't clarify it enough, over here in the time we have. But essentially, we need to know where we are. It's okay to be outraged, and it's okay to seek a visible cause, because the visible cause can take us to the invisible cause when we're honest with ourselves. So we should let ourselves, feel that blame energy, because how can you heal it if you don't experience it? It's part of the, something's wrong, and I want to pinpoint the problem to solve it. That's the mind talking. That's what the mind does. It pinpoints problems and it addresses them. It takes all it knows and it tries to find a solution. But the heart has a different way. And that can work and support the mind instead of being antagonistic to it. And the body itself can have full grounded feeling in all of it, so we don't get thrown about and feel ungrounded in it. So we're completely stable and confident. It's okay to blame as long as you're aware of what you're doing and you realize it's really not all of you that's blaming. The part that's observing the blamer is actually the part that wants to heal the inner child and all of that, the part that's wounded. But at the same time, there is perpetration. Maybe we don't scapegoat the Illuminati, the bankers, this and that, but we need to point out the causality of psychopathy as a disease state, and it's represented by them, by what they're doing. So we are now in the position of victim, but as we can also say, there by the grace of God go I. Under what circumstances would I possibly be one of them? What part of me is connected to how they are? Because there's something in me that I'm not accepting, maybe that I'm actually condemning, but that needs to come out. And I felt this, and it's horrific. I mean, the hellish, it's like being on in the head of a centipede or something. I mean, I've been dealing with occultism for a while and have been exploring this whole realm that people call demonic and all of this. And most of it's church crap. But, perpetrated by the same people who are telling us the Muslims are to blame. But there's a lot of it that's basically what everybody is scared shitless of actually facing, what you call evil. And we need to tread very carefully and deal with what we can address and gain our ground and be able to be okay with where we are, so we can basically get our bearings, and then step by step we can move into the more difficult stuff. Because there's this sense that I feel the Matrix is projecting that time is running out. Hurry up, you gotta. No, my first act as creator is that I decree that there is enough time for healing. There's enough time. There's a poet, I forget who said it, but world enough in time. And I would say world and love enough in time. All of these things are in infinite proportion if we can just open up to them and trust our own honesty.
Yeah. I chuckle because, you know, none of us like to feel like we're the ones we're the one that's at fault. It's not my problem. Look at me. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, and the problem is still here. How could it be my fault? It's not something I want. And I've wrestled with this over and over again. I beat myself up mercilessly with my own self-judgment for not being loving enough, not being forgiving enough, for feeling the anger sometimes. And yet I have to go through it because, I mean, I've been impressed for a long time now that I'm not going to heal by avoidance or denial. I rail against avoidance and denial all the time because Spirit keeps saying to me, Ron, that's not where the answer comes from. Exactly. You're never going to be whole by rejecting a part of anything. All the parts have to come together to heal.
Can we take that the understanding that it's nobody's fault? Can we live with that? And what does that mean? There is a perpetration, there is a disease, there is a wounding, there is something, injustice, but it's nobody's fault. That's good news because that means we can actually do something about it without, coming into conflict. And what was the other thing that you said? Can we actually, there are some points, when something comes through, but I feel a resistance in actually saying them. So the last phrase that you were expressing meets with a lot of chaos. It's almost that area where people are afraid to approach. It's not so much a personal resistance in the sense of if I were alone, I would feel this, but whenever I'm around people and feeling the collective energies, it's almost like, this is we're afraid to go there. And one of these episodes just came through and kind of wiped my mind as a blanket type of thing. But what was the last thing you were talking about before I answered you?
Oh, well, I was talking about how I rail against denial and people that try to become whole by rejecting parts. That was
Exactly. This is what I wanted to say that I feel might not go well. Can anyone out there accept that they are evil? How does it feel to accept the fact that if those guys are evil, I'm evil? And then encompass that, because I'm not exclusively evil. There are fragments and they're hurt and they're whatever. Under certain conditions, we have a normal, healthy cell becoming a cancer cell. And we call the cancer cell evil for what it is, what it does. Because we don't know what it is because we're not connected to it. We only observe what it does, and that is evil. Evil is a bunch of actions. It's not a state of being. If you really want to understand the state of being, you have to pull it in and feel it and identify with it, and then you can move from there. And that's an act of courage. And it takes time and it takes caution. But you won't be overrun by the devil when that happens. You won't turn demonic and you won't go insane. You can take it step by step. And if you can do that, then your mind is actually liberated and you have clarity. Consciousness of heaven can come through and you can feel what the intent of love is all about. Because it's not out there anymore. And that's where the power is, right here.
Well, the idea of anything being out there, somewhere other than in here, that's the delusion. That's the delusion that we all face as human beings because we've been trained to see out there. And we've not been trained to look at the only place where all the answers really are, which is in here.
As a physicist, I am fully aware of that more than most people because it's pounded into us. So I would say that people could get confused with that. It's like, what, do I have to keep looking at my internal organs or something? It's no. Feel the sense of what objectivity feels like when you're projecting out there, and feel how it feels when you're internalized. Now live in the world as if the whole world is internalized without any sense of in here or out there. It's a feeling. It's a sense of enlivenment. Things feel more intimate that way. And again, it's something we're learning. Like you say, with the freedom reigns things, there's an energy permeating slowly. And of course, there's all these perpetration energies that are coming to stop it because that's their program. And we're going to meet them head on. But at every moment, little by little, we're gaining more and more resources to do so.
And we are the resource.
Exactly.
We are the value. And I love that that's what they're saying. All of the value and all of the problems and all of the answers are in us.
Exactly. The gain of resources. Exactly. The gain of resources is an apocalypse. That is why we are in the apocalypse. Our value is being revealed.
And all of the things that we've hidden are being unveiled. Exactly. With the revealing of who we are, there's an unveiling and a revealing. And together they are working, doing this little dance that ultimately will liberate all of us, as I see it.
Exactly. You asked the question, quickly, you asked the question of why some people say that, many of us, all of us say, we're going through this, I'm doing the best I can, but it's not good enough. Well, you have to understand from where I'm coming from, if you can embody all of evil, then that evil is the part of you that is your value when you transform it. When that's transformed, then you will be able to do everything that you can do. The power, we see the power in them, in the perpetrators. Well, once you embody that identity and accept it and love it, and then experience its transformation bit by bit, then that power to do is yours. But it's a process, so theirs will decrease or go through ups and downs, ours will go, a seesaw. It's a process, and still there is great reluctance, and there's no condemnation for it, because I have it too. There is great reluctance to step into those shoes. We're almost like 8.5s, we're not 9s quite, because that final step of actually being in the perpetrator, in the heart of the so-called darkness, is still something we're learning to do. Us and everybody's a 9 in that respect.
And it doesn't feel good. When you're actually feeling the energy, it doesn't feel good. But I've long ago been impressed that in doing shadow work, the treasure is not in the light, it's in the darkness.
Exactly.
It's exactly 180 degrees from where we think the answer is. If we can learn to utilize the gifts that are hidden in the darkness, we'll transform the whole world.
Well, here's something. The light is not holding the program. The dark is holding the program in manifestation. It's applying the program to us, and we feel victims by it. Once we integrate the dark, then we come into the position of being able to release the program. As long as the dark is on the outside, we cannot release the perpetrator matrix mind. And releasing it means it's given back to spirit, and then it's healed on its own terms, because it cannot heal the program, and not the trauma and how we feel and all of that, but the actual pattern of that causes all the rest is part of the mind of spirit, so to speak. But the thing is that as that's released, then the healed version automatically comes to us, because there's no time delay, so it's a continuity.
Well, I think we actually today on the thing, I can see what time we started, which I didn't see when we did the last video. And we've already been 24 minutes.
Okay. Boy, it seemed a lot longer. I thought a lot was said this time.
I think a lot was said too. So I'm just going to give you an opportunity to say whatever you want in conclusion, and then we'll wrap up this one, and we'll plan to do another one next week on one of the days.
Whenever you're moved, Ron, because I see that you have a connection with your listeners, and even those who don't listen to you. It's a whole connectivity, so anything you feel, there's a lot of personal things and all of that, but there's always a sense of innate consideration. And it's not almost like, I just care about you and I want to know and serve you and all of that. It's an innate, natural connection to the field of anybody who is prone to listen and get something from whatever you're communicating. And so whenever you do feel moved, it's always the right time. You called me at a time when this place was packed and it was impossible to get a computer. But by the time you said, well, how about 7 o'clock, everybody left. And so there's always a kind of synchronicity of the topics. I feel that what we've discussed today is almost like a step closer to answering certain questions that people may have. This isn't organized, and it's not like every video is going to be part of the greater continuum of lessons we have to offer. It's off the cuff. I have no clue what we're going to talk about each time. I even asked you, and I'm sure that you're almost iffy about it, but there's this sense that an energy, and we address the energy, and then people respond to that. So I encourage people to recognize processes that the matrix does not encourage. Recognize all these energy sensate intuitive processes, even beyond anything you've read about them or whatever the sages say or whatever the traditions say or whatever the authorities say. Create your own reality beginning from that perspective, from taking nothing for granted and from daring to define your way. So, not to continue more, I think that's good enough.
Thank you, I do too. And this will be tomorrow's video, just so you know. I'll do the processing today and it'll go up tomorrow.
I'm actually very interested to see it, and I'm sure many others will as well. Thank you for having me once again, and until next time.
Thank you, Aristo. Namaste.
Namaste.